At first glance, trench warfare is monotonous and boring. A permanent state of armistice during the day and fierce fighting at night gives a false sense of order and security. Sometimes it seems that a soldier has nothing to fear as long as the sun is still up in the sky. The hidden threats are numerous. The topic of clearing landmines from the combat zone was repeatedly discussed at meetings of the Donbass Contact Group. They signed many agreements about clearing such explosive devices from areas near the front line, infrastructure facilities, fields, and roads. On March 15th, the governor of Luhansk region, Georgy Tuka, announced that despite the involvement of international experts, clearing the combat zones in the Luhansk region alone may take as long as 10 years. You are watching the 87th episode of the History of War series. In spring 2014, the Russian Federation annexed Crimea, and in the summer of that year, it invaded eastern Ukraine. As a result of a number of battles, this offensive was successfully halted, but the war was far from over. Spying and diplomacy, economics, propaganda, and armed conflict. These are all the elements of hybrid warfare, which we're trying to figure out. On March 15th, one instance of violation of no-firing regime was recorded near Popasna, Luhansk region. The hotspot in the confrontation remained the suburbs of Donetsk. Here, while attempting to force Ukrainian troops from the Avdiivka industrial zone, the militants made active use of mortars and the onboard weapons of infantry fighting vehicles. This forced the Ukrainian army to retaliate. At the same time, 3 Ukrainian citizens were successfully rescued from the captivity of militants. Near Novotroitska, hiding under the cover of mortar shelling, sabotage groups of the Russian occupation forces made 2 attempts at infiltrating deep into the territories controlled by the official authorities. Both of these attempts were ultimately thwarted, and some of the saboteurs were wounded. The next day, militant activity near Popasna intensified once again. Besides, while the previous day they had just fired anti-tank missiles at Ukrainian positions on March 16th, one of the Ukrainian army's stronghold was also attacked by a sabotage unit at nightfall. Thanks to modern observation equipment provided by volunteers, the enemy was detected in a timely manner and the attack was repelled. After a brief lull, shelling of Ukrainian positions in Zaitsev resumed. Moreover, the attacks, some of which also involved armored vehicles, continued both day and night, virtually non-stop. As a result, several residential buildings were damaged. A similar situation was observed near Avdiivka. Having received a fresh portion of ammunition the day before, the terrorists weren't shy about actively expending it. Near the Avdiivka industrial zone, in addition to infantry and special units, they used mortar batteries, tanks, and individual sniper groups. There was also an episode of a militant tank firing at civilian targets for unknown reasons, which was documented by official representatives of the OSCE mission. Terrorists also shelled Ukrainian positions with mortars in Krasnohorivka and Shirokine. The evening mortar shelling in Shirokine was observed by Lithuanian Foreign Minister Linas Linkevicius, who was visiting the ATO zone at the time. 24 hours, there were more than 30 instances of shelling. 2 Ukrainian soldiers were injured, and 1 member of the 58th Brigade died as a result of enemy sniper fire. On March 17th, in connection with a visit by representatives of the OSCE mission to the area near Avdiivka and Yasinovata, the intensity of hostilities nearby fell sharply, and Russian militants temporarily ceased the use of heavy weapons. But neither in Zaitsev nor on the Svitlodarsk Bulge was there any pause in large-scale shelling. In addition to small arms and grenade launchers, over the course of the day, terrorists fired over 200 mortar shells at Ukrainian positions in these areas. In fact, 1 in every 3 attacks was carried out using heavy weapons, which had allegedly been withdrawn. There were brief instances of mortar shelling in Novotroitsk, Ludiane, and Shirokine. In addition, militants used the onboard weapons of infantry fighting vehicles and sniper rifles. Due to heightened enemy activity in this sector, ATO forces repeatedly fired back and suppressed enemy attacks. The ceasefire was violated more than 40 times in total on that day. 3 Ukrainian soldiers were injured. On March 18th, after a one-day-long lull, the situation in the Avdiivka industrial zone worsened again. Militants repeatedly attacked Ukrainian positions and shelled them with mortars. The Ukrainian army actively defended itself while fighting off these attacks. According to operational information, over the past few days, ATO forces killed more than 10 militants in the area. In Zaitsev, in addition to mortars, terrorists also used 122mm cannon artillery. Small arms combat continued on the Svitlodarsk Bulge. At the same time, there was relative calm near the Donetsk airport, which can be explained by the redeployment of militant forces and hardware to the area around Avdiivka. A total of 36 instances of shelling took place in the Donetsk sector during the day, and the occupants used weapons 15 times in the Mariupol sector. Mortars were used in Krasnohorivka, Hnutove, and Shirokine. Near Hnutove, Junior Sergeant Pavlo Litvinenko of the 54th Brigade died as a result of a landmine explosion while performing a combat mission. 2 more soldiers were injured. On the same day, in Starobilsk, Bilovodsk, and Markiivka, the Security Service of Ukraine carried out a special operation during which it detained 12 informants working for the Luhansk People's Republic. The spies had been collecting information about the movements of ATO forces for 2 curators who, in turn, were directly supervised by members of Russian special services. The militants used this information to prepare attacks of sabotage. In Odessa, officers of the Security Service of Ukraine also detained 5 militants of the Luhansk People's Republic. It was discovered that, at the direction of Russian special services, this group was to carry out an armed attack on a penitentiary institution and set off an explosive device during a religious holiday. Their goal was to destabilize the situation in the city and provoke ethnic conflicts. On the same day, local residents noticed 2 buses with people in clothes that resembled uniforms of the armed forces of Ukraine in the temporarily occupied territory near the village of Bezimenne, Novoazovsk district, Donetsk region. The goal of such a masquerade remained unknown, given the love of Kremlin strategists for various kinds of provocation in an attempt to ensure themselves against false accusations. The Ukrainian authorities widely publicized this fact. Please note that Ukrainian army uniforms have always been available for purchase, and had people looking like soldiers of the Ukrainian army committed a series of war crimes in the designated area soon after this discovery, only maximum publicity in this matter could have protected the Ukrainian army from any false accusations. It should be noted that on March 19th, militants issued a report about an alleged Ukrainian reconnaissance group getting blown up in their own minefield near Donetsk. However, no mine casualties were reported that day, and accordingly, we can assume that the mythical scouts were militants dressed as Ukrainian soldiers who were performing a special task. At the same time, the general situation in the Donetsk sector remained tense. Provocations took place along the entire length of the front line in the sector. To this end, militants used mortars, grenade launchers, and small arms. Traditionally, the peak of activity occurred in the dark. Besides, combat continued even during the day near Avdiivka, and around midnight terrorists used artillery, launching a barrage against the positions of ATO forces, which included 6 152mm shells. One soldier was injured during the day by a tripwire-activated mine in the Bakhmut district. In Avdiivka itself, officers of the Security Service of Ukraine arrested an informant of the DPR who, intending to gather intelligence, attempted to illegally cross the demarcation line. One more former militant was detained in Kramatorsk. On March 20th, in the area near Trochizbenka, occupiers used an 82mm mortar, prompting an appropriate reaction from the Ukrainian army, which forced militants to cease fire. But in Avdiivka, the entire range of heavy weapons was used. Militants used armored vehicles, mortars, and even large-caliber artillery, which occupied positions near Yasinuvata. A similar, albeit less tense situation could be observed on the Svitlodarsk Bulge and in Zaitsevo, where militants gathered a large force and a huge amount of heavy weaponry. To stir hysteria in the information field, the press service of the so-called DPR Ministry of Defense stated that the armed forces of Ukraine were preparing for urban combat. Near Novotroitska, ATO forces successfully repelled an attack by a group of militants. 2 more such provocations took place in Mariinka. 2 soldiers of the 39th Battalion died, and 2 others were injured near Avdiivka when their truck was blown up by a mine. The ceasefire was observed in Luhansk region on March 21st, but in the Donetsk region, there were 21 attacks on Ukrainian positions. Militant activity in the Avdiivka industrial zone slightly decreased, which was also confirmed by OSCE deputy head Alexander Hug. In the morning, Ukrainian troops repelled an attack by 10 militants in the area between Novotroitska and Dokuchaevsk. Later, the militants carried out several attacks on Ukrainian positions along these lines. The ceasefire was also violated in Mariinka and Shirokine. There were no fatalities among the Ukrainian military as a result of these hostilities, but 3 men were injured when a BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicle set off a landmine. As a result, the Avdiivka industrial zone and adjacent territories remained the hottest sector of the ATO zone. Ignoring all agreements, the militants used absolutely all types of weaponry available to them, and the Ukrainian army was forced to respond to the terrorists in kind. The intensity of fighting for Avdiivka was somewhat reminiscent of the battle for Donetsk airport. But the armed forces of Ukraine acted aggressively and carefully using previously acquired combat experience, the price for which was literally paid in blood. Over the course of the week, ATO forces eliminated at least 10 invaders, and around 40 more soldiers of the Kremlin's hybrid army were injured and sent to the hospital. Due to large losses and poor treatment by their commanders, 7 fighters from the so-called 11th Separate DPR Motorized Rifle Regiment defected over the course of the week. Another local militant was killed by a Russian officer while attempting to surrender. Trench warfare is at first glance monotonous and boring, but there are numerous hidden threats.